You're listening to the Co-Creator Network. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Limitless Living Radio, a program dedicated to helping people create and live the best life they can, regardless of their age, where they are in life, their personal circumstances, or what they have or don't have. My name is Judith Albright, and my co-host is Barb Adams. And with the coming of religious holidays every year, the question often comes up about religion and spirituality. Are they the same things or aren't they? And since we've just celebrated Passover and then just Easter, we thought this would be a timely topic to address. And a very good person to address and expand on this is our guest today, and she is the Reverend Barbara Bew, who is the Senior Minister and Community Spiritual Leader at the Creative Center for Spiritual Living in Greeley, Colorado. So Reverend Barb, welcome to our show, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We're really happy that you could be with us today, and I'm just going to ask you to tell us a little more about yourself, the work that you do, and we'll go from there. So, Reverend Barb.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Actually, I was very excited to get the invitation. A little bit about me. I have a church in Greeley, Colorado, which is in the middle of pretty conservative Weld County. And I think we're the beacon of new thought in the area, and you know, is the only I think 3 now female ministers in that area as well. It's been kind of an interesting journey, and I feel like I'm called there for a reason, and you know, just like I was called to do this work. I call myself the reluctant minister. It was not something that was, you know, in my top 10 things that I thought I would be doing in my life. It was the thing that I'm called to do, and so I love it, and I just do what I do what's mine to do.
Well, you've had an interesting history too that prepared you for all this work, really.
Yeah, I was in management with Federal Express for 15 years, and then I had an antique business, and you know, in the meantime, I was doing my own spiritual work, and just kind of doing you know, what's putting out there in the universe, you know, what's the next step, and following what unfolded in front of me. Kicking and screaming and dragging sometimes when it became clear that this, you know, that minister was going to be my title, because only crazy people do this. And you know, really, it's an interesting vocation, call it. But
so, Reverend Barb, I want to jump in here for a second. How did you get the calling then?
You know, I was involved in a Science of Mind, or you know, Centers for Spiritual Living organization in Long Beach, California, and the minister, and I was helping the minister and on the board, and we were talking one day, and she says, you need to go be a practitioner. And I was like, yeah, you know, that's never going to happen. And she's like, you know, you're going to end up being a minister. And I said, you're on crack. And she's still laughing at me. But a couple years later, about a year later, I said, you know, I will go through practitioner training. I want to start practitioner training for my own learning and my own journey, but I'm not going to be a practitioner. Mm-hmm. And then I was doing some visioning. Yeah, famous last words. I was doing some visioning about a year into my practitioner studies, because it's a 2-year program. And I was doing some visioning with a group, and Reverend Christian was one of those people. And I don't know, it just hit me in the middle of something. And I turned around and looked at her, and I was like, I have to go to ministerial school. And she just started laughing. But I said again, I was like, I'm just going for my own education, and I'm not going to be a minister. And then through school, about halfway through school, I was like, okay, you know, I'll be a good staff minister. I have all this business background. I don't really like to talk in public. I was very, had a lot of, you know, I did not do public speaking. And about halfway through, something just started to change. And then I took a workshop from Reverend Cynthia at Mile High Church in Denver, and on stage presence and things like that. And she made us write a paragraph about what we were the most afraid about being on stage. And we were supposed to memorize it and come back the next week and do it from the stage. And of course, she turned on the giant Jumbotron things they have there too, which are like my biggest nightmare. And I almost threw up getting up to the stage and doing it. And she talked me through it. And once I did that, and once I spoke those fears out loud, they just went away. And now you can't shut me up, obviously. But and then something happened, and what I found was that I could really be myself and speak in public. I could be funny and irreverent, and I have a community who believe. I believe that God finds ways in through laughter. And we laugh a lot. I kid around and say that most of the time I feel like I do a 20-minute comedy routine every week. But we go back and forth between very, very deep and what comes through and then laughing about it at the same time. Because, life is not supposed to be a struggle. And all this spiritual stuff, we make it so hard, and we make it so like we have to do all this work to fix ourselves. And that's not really it, We get to be joyful in remembering who we really are. And I think we forget that sometimes. We get way too serious about all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a hard time?
Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question here. I'll jump in. How were you initially received in Greeley? Because we know that this is an extremely conservative farming type community, and this is a concept that is not readily accepted over there. So how did you find people responding to you in the beginning?
Well, what's interesting, Judith, is that the church that I serve has been in Greeley for 35 years.
Mm-hmm. Really?
And yeah, and mostly small, had a couple of ministers, went for years and years and years without ministers. I started guest speaking over there while I was finishing my master's degree because they didn't have a minister, and there was a group of us that were sort of rotating around. And honestly, I just fell in love with the people there, and enough of them felt the same way about me that they asked me to stay. And so the church community is amazing, and there are people that walk in the room every single week that walk up to me and say, "Oh my God, I did not know that this was in Greeley." I mean, we're still trying to figure out how to do a better job of getting the word out, but Greeley is full of people that are searching for all the same things that there are people searching for in every community, for like-minded people who are on a spiritual journey, who are open and caring, and there's some really amazing good people in Greeley. And it's a very artistic community too. UNC is a school that's full of musicians and theater people and so there is a segment of the population in the city of Greeley that is still stubbornly very conservative and right now they're really loud, just like everywhere else, because they're losing people and they're losing momentum, and so their response to that is to be louder. And we just keep trudging along and growing,
So Reverend Barb, when we started this, we were talking about the religion versus spirituality. And obviously over there, what I'm hearing you say is that people are seeking. It's become quite popular in recent years to distinguish between spirituality and religion. And while there are valid distinctions between the two, don't you think, though, there are also a number of problematic distinctions which often and unnecessarily divide the two fields of thought?
Well, sure. In New Thought, which is what we're part of, we are drawing from all of these old spiritual traditions, Christianity, Hinduism, the Bhagavad Gita. And all of this stuff out there, and we look at those common truths between them, and find the truth for us now. And really, it's not that much different than a person who is spending all of their time with the Bible, finding the truth in it for them now. We don't take it literally. We look at it historically and metaphysically instead of literally. But I do think that people who are studiers of Christianity, not people who are necessarily just followers of what they're told, but people who are studiers of Christianity are on just as much of a spiritual journey as those of us who are on these other things, and really all paths lead to God in my mind. So if all paths lead to God, there's a lot more in common than we realize. And anybody who I tell people who I run into all the time who are Christian, I'm like, go read the Bhagavad Gita, because what you will find is that Christianity is full of Hinduism, and Christians just don't know that.
Yeah. Exactly. So, Reverend Barb, would you say then that religion is spiritual and spirituality can also be considered religious? Because one really tends to be more personal and private, while the other one is tending to incorporate more public rituals and organized doctrines.
Sure. I think that that religion, as we know it, especially in the United States, is full of doctrine. And I think that most people who call themselves spiritual are looking to be away from that sort of dogma doctrine that says that you have to do these things and that you are required to do these things and you have to follow these rules. And so I think in some ways the spiritual thing feels more fluid and more, but I also think that there are a lot of things about that let people kind of off the hook in a way, like we tend to go, oh, I don't need to go to church because I'm just being spiritual. And there is great value in community and in that support and in that coming in and getting recharged and feeling solid in what you are believing and what you are practicing every single week. And so there's good in some of those traditions of go to church. And, we all try to learn how to do meditation every single day of our, and practice meditation every day. And it takes a lot of us years to do that. Well, Catholics have been going to mass every day for, hundreds of years. And so, there's so much overlap, and I'm not sure that I completely answered your question at this point.
Well, we should probably define what we think spirituality really is. And, in my course that I wrote, I try to define that, and it's a search for meaning, for our place in the universe. And it's not particularly tied to any particular dogma or belief system that you can, it's what we find meaningful in life. And I don't think any particular religion has a corner on that. I think we all have a little piece of it.
Right. And so I think people who call themselves religious are looking at their religion and calling that the way, that's the correct way, that's the only way. And I think that's the biggest difference between religion and spirit. Being religious and being spiritual is a belief that your way is the only way versus a belief that there are multiple ways and that there is fluidity in it.
So the question comes,
and I could be wrong, but it feels very much like the spiritual journey is, and unfortunately, I think in the United States, people who are religious have become vocal in religious institutions have been. Let me say that again, not people who are religious. Actually, religious institutions have become vocally negative, and so a lot of what they do and teach, and the good that they have been doing in the world, in a lot of ways, is being drowned out by this negativity and, and politicalness, really.
Well, this exclusionary thing, that we're seeing here, that if you're not part of us, then you must be against us. This is really polarizing people, because if it's my way or the highway, and everybody who's not on that path with you is somehow considered the enemy or not worthy or whatever. It's amazing for me to see that.
In the same vein, a lot of people in the spirituality fields are doing the same thing. They're polarizing just as much as those who are, saying in the religious fields, it's our way or the highway. Both sides are doing almost the same thing, are they not?
I don't know. It's hard. I think, we talk a lot about being very open to everyone's path and being respectful of everyone's path. But it's very difficult, I think, to be honest and to not think that the journey that you're on is the better one.
Yep.
Because otherwise, why would you be doing it? So if we're really going to get honest about it, most people who are, even the people who are call themselves spiritual, who are saying, well, yes, your path is better for you, and your path is valid for you and not me. It's hard to not, underneath your breath be going, and mine's better, because why else would you be doing it if you didn't think it was somehow better?
Exactly. And I think a lot of people too, like in the religious fields, they may say those who are following the spiritual path really don't have the connection to God or whatever, whereas the people in spiritual traditions say religion threatens and terrifies, and it tries to exert control over people and, all of those things.
It has
It has.
historically,
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at history in the, particularly the Middle Ages and that, I mean, the whole system of religion through the Catholic Church and the Christian churches was about a system of control and about governing and about, holding this idea for people, that telling them that their life would be better in the afterlife. So please don't worry about the fact that you're poor and we're not, and we're asking you to give us all of your money. I mean, there was a lot of that. I think that's, most because of education and information that's changed somewhat. But there are still, a lot of rules in some of those places, and younger folks especially are kind of rebelling against that.
Well, think of all the wars we fought over what we believe. If you go back in history, I mean, how many wars have we fought? Because
we're still fighting them.
We're still doing it. I mean, we're not the only ones. I mean,
no.
I mean, religion and money are the big, war.
Well, this is what's going on today. I mean, we're, this whole thing with Islam versus Christianity and everybody else. I mean, isn't it the same thing as like same song, second verse, maybe 27th verse? I don't know.
Yeah, you would hope that we would learn at some point.
You think
and I hope that people who are in New Thought and people who are, I mean, our mantra is that we're creating a world that works for everyone. And so, it is certainly my deep hope that we don't get into that trap at some point where we're, and that we don't have to defend ourselves. I think there's just room for everybody. And what calls to my heart and what calls to my spirit might be different than what calls to yours. Well, go do that, and be good in it. Be good in the world as a result of it.
But unfortunately, not all of us think that. I mean, there's all these whole religious factors across the world, that are saying, no, it's not going to be like that.
But fewer and fewer and fewer of them. And, we're just evolving slowly. I mean, granted, I wish we could wake up and all be better, but we're not.
Yeah, nice. Reverend Barb, how do you feel about the politicization of religion, though, right now? Because we've got so much fundamentalism. There may be fewer and fewer, but they're becoming more and more powerful. You've got the really strong Christian fundamentalists now growing here in the West versus the Islamic fundamentalists elsewhere.
Well,
how do you see that?
Personally, I think that when that things that are dying protest loudly. And really, there are smaller and smaller numbers of those people. Fundamentalist churches are losing congregation in droves. And so they're getting louder and louder. And yes, they have had some definite pull in the Republican Party and in politics in the United States. And I think, I think that's even starting to shake out differently. I'm a little bit of a political junkie, and I'm watching the Republican Party looking inward at itself, and I see a potential split between the evangelicals and the people who want to govern from a conservative financial viewpoint and from what they believe conservative values are, but not necessarily religious values. And the gay marriage thing is just an out picture of that, because especially young people, it's a non-issue now for them. They're like, yeah, my Uncle John is gay, and I'm not going to hate him because you say so. And we're not and in all fairness, and we want things to be fair for everybody, because that's the world that we're supposed to be living in. So I think it's just that loud screaming clamor for attention as things are dying out, and
well, the scary thing is going on in the world of Islam. I mean, look what's happening in Africa and in Asia. And that's the scary thing, is it seems like it appeals to the third world. And I'm hoping that we can overcome that, and that it's not going to become a point where we actually have to fight another religious war over such stuff as this.
God, I hope not to. I hope not to. And I know that when we bring a lot of fear to anything, we give it energy, and so
exactly, right.
to me, the answer is, what are we doing in our home, in our neighborhood, in the world to make things better for people? Because, what's really going on is that people are hungry and someone's showing up and feeding them. And as they're feeding them, they're saying, yeah, I have this great belief. So what are we doing to feed people? and to support them in having a better experience of life that would allow them the room to think freely and to find, a spiritual path. And I think there is if you look historically, I look at the Middle East and I think, okay, the Middle East is kind of who Europe was, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, in that, we're right, we have to be right, because if any part of what we believe is wrong, then it all might be wrong, and we're afraid of that. And the education level is, the information just does not get around over there like it does here. And we forget that stuff because we take it so for granted here that we can sit on our computers and talk to each other like this and be on the radio. And over there, somebody might not hear from anyone outside of their village for months at a time. And we just don't relate to that. So, I think, they're growing up. They're going through their Victorian age, which is what, we had when we had people burned at the stake in Salem. We had our fundamentalist age too. And hopefully we can all keep from going to war about it.
Exactly. And going backwards to that also.
Right. There's too many of us to go backwards in the U.S.
Well, we can't. We can't go backwards, and we can't go back to 1950s either. We just can't.
No, and if you look at Europe on the flip side is way ahead of us. They got rid of guns a long time ago. They got rid of because they've had war on their shore and they know what that's like. And and a whole lot of Europe is pretty agnostic, and secular. So we may be headed in that direction. Who knows? It's going to take a while.
Yes, a lot of things.
So, Reverend Barb, what I'm hearing you say then is we are progressing, where we're kind of blending and kind of uniting more or less, where religion and spirituality actually will start coming back together.
Well, hopefully, I've put feelers out there now and again. I listen to Joel Osteen every once in a while to check in. Yeah. And he's filling a football stadium with people in Texas every single week. And until he does his altar call, he pretty much gives a talk that I could give in any New Thought church or any New Thought minister could give. And there is a whole lot of that going on in the world. The main difference being the questions about the Savior doctrine and the belief in hell, and those things, even I think amongst clergy in Christianity who really study the Bible and who really study the teachings of Jesus and are part of the Jesus seminar, for instance, and really look at what he really said versus what he really didn't say and who he really was versus who he probably wasn't. There are more and more people coming to these same conclusions. Jesus was Jewish. He did not want to be a savior. That's not what he did. He taught a message of love and inclusion and taking care of people and loving your neighbor. He was not, he was a political rabble rouser in that time, but he wasn't. You look at church history and that setting him up as the savior and you have to come here to be saved. That was all part of that control thing. And I think more and more clergy and people are not all people are ready to hear it. I mean, I know a minister who came to this same conclusion about this stuff, who had a huge mega church in Oklahoma. And when he started to question all that, his church fell apart. Wow. And it took him quite a while. Now he's in Chicago with another large church and he's, New Thought, but it took him a while.
So with your own congregation, where would you say they're at, Reverend Barb?
My congregation, in terms of...
Are they pretty much all New Thought, or are they coming in as well from more traditional backgrounds and just are being more open to this?
I think I would say 90% of us came from a traditional background. I mean, I grew up conservative Lutheran, but the people who land in our communities or in my community are people who are seeking something beyond that, who that didn't work for or who it doesn't work for, who are saying, I cannot buy that the idea of a loving God has this concept of eternity in hell. That just doesn't go together for me. I'm looking for an experience that is more connected somehow than I was getting before. And those are and a lot of intellectual seekers as well, I think I read someplace one time that, New Thought as a movement has a lot of people who have college degrees and who are masters, and higher, and who are intellectual seekers as well as spiritual seekers. Even if they're not degreed, they're people who read a lot,
Mm-hmm. Well, a question that always came up for me was that how is it that God could give us free will and then punish us for using it? I mean, isn't this just a complete opposite? I mean, God is a loving God, but then he turns around and punishes us. I mean, I can never swallow that concept.
You have kids, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So is there anything that any one of your children could do that would put you in a place of having them spend this idea of eternity in hell?
Absolutely not.
Right. And so
they're still our kids. We love them no matter what,
Exactly. And so how could God be any different than that?
Well, that's the question I always had, is that this makes no sense to me.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of things about it that you just think about it, I'm not that much of a Bible scholar, but I don't remember that Jesus ever said, I came here to save you.
No,
this is something. I think this
he
is.
Said, I came to show you. He said, I came to show you the way. I think he came to show. Yeah, I came to show you the way.
Mm-hmm.
And
and that's the whole thing.
And that you could do better things than even I.
Exactly.
There's that possibility that, hey, I'm getting this, but hey, you may even get it more than I do.
It was the love and law. Judaism at that time in history had become very focused on Old Testament law. And, the clean and the unclean. And we're not going to help people because they are part of this unclean group of people. And we're going to live in these rules. And he came along and said, you know what? That's nonsense. You don't pass by the guy bleeding on the road. You take care of him, And so his message was one of bringing love back into spiritual practice. That's how I look at it.
And yet this concept of sin is so prevalent. I go ahead.
Well, I think for a long time in our evolutionary process as human beings, we needed somebody to blame if we did something wrong, or we needed somebody to blame if things didn't go the way we thought they should go. And we didn't understand a lot of science and a lot of how the world works, And the more we understand about those things, the more we understand how we influence them. And the more we understand that some of it is just the weather,
Yeah.
And really, sometimes the weather is just the weather.
I know. We're putting judgment on it.
Right. But if you're, you don't have, but at some point in our history, the weather was this giant thing that made us feel like we had displeased something or someone,
Right.
And
this whole concept of sin, I don't know when that became popular, but sin is really an archery term. It simply means missing the mark.
Yes.
So how did that come about that all of a sudden we're all sinners and we're not fit to be seen in the eyes of God?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that came about during the Nicene Council and whatnot, didn't it? And
I think so. Yeah,
I think it was really, I haven't really looked at that particular, when did that show up, but
I know it does.
I think it's part of that whole system of, getting people into a system. A lot of, a lot of the books of the Bible outside of the Gospels, if you look at them from the standpoint of were these people church building, you can see the church building in it. We make these rules because then people have to come here to be, to talk to God, like the whole system of, and I don't want to be, I'm not trying to bash on Catholics by any means, because it's all, because a lot of Christian, it's all flowing from the same stuff.
Exactly.
And those factors, those things you're talking about there, Reverend Barb, those things were built in there to remove you from God. The church took the control.
Yes, because then you had to come to the church and you had to pay to be part of that system, and so it helped to perpetuate itself. And it was a great system. Really, it'd be way easier to fundraise with hell on your side. I often think.
Well, think about the Christ of the Apocalypse. The whole purpose of that whole deal was to frighten people into going to church.
Sure.
If you don't do what we say and come into this church and do whatever you're supposed to do, then you're going to, burn in the fires. Yeah. And
So,
that
and
whole
now,
process.
I don't think in the United States that I think there's a lot of people that go to church who are not doing it because they're afraid,
No,
but they're
this is
doing it
medieval times.
because, yeah, but but I often wonder, like I look down the street at the mega church and I'm like, okay, what's the draw? What's the draw?
Oh.
And there is still some guilt and some wanting to be forgiven. I think there's a lot of power in that wanting to be forgiven.
And don't we wonder why we all think we need to be forgiven in the first place?
Because we all make mistakes, and we don't grow up learning how to forgive ourselves.
Well, and this is one thing I keep finding in my personal practice, and I've alluded to this before, about every single person practically feels that they're unworthy. Mm-hmm. And we learn this in the cradle, and a lot of it is religious teachings.
Well, sure. First thing, one of the first rituals we go through is, we're cleansing you of this sin that you came into the world with.
Exactly.
So, there has probably some body memory in that, at some level. And our parents reinforced that, and Sunday school certainly reinforced that.
I know. They just passed on what they knew, so we just perpetuated this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, a lot of people just don't ask a lot of questions. I mean, the people who are asking questions are landing in our churches. Right. But a lot of people just are happy to go along with whatever it is that they have done, and that is okay.
Well, it's like religion doesn't really ask you to investigate, and you don't really question through religion. But spirituality basically gets you questioning everything and says it's okay to question.
Yeah, that's a good difference, actually. I mean, people who are doing spiritual stuff are doing everything from, Eckhart Tolle to Deepak Chopra to Judith Albright to coming to, and listening to. I mean, really, there's this huge realm of spiritual. And in the United States, or in Christianity and religion, there's the Bible and books that are written about the Bible.
Yeah.
And so that's very true. It's the seeker. The seekers are seeking and finding other things and spiritualness. And I do believe that there are people in the Christian tradition who find it spiritual. For who it's a spiritual experience.
Right. So we believe that we can't
whose hearts are in it, whose practice is in it, and all of that. And that's okay. If all paths lead to God, then all paths have validness.
Mm-hmm. So we can be both religious and spiritual at the same time. But I think it's hard to be spiritual when you just follow the dogma and you never question and you don't ever think for yourself.
If you're not thinking, you're probably just going. Right, exactly. I don't know. I grew up in that whole church. You just go to church, you say the same thing every week. I could still walk into a Lutheran church and probably recite it all from memory without even thinking about it.
I call that formula religion. If you learn all of this, you're good to go.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's also, there's so much appeal for people in not having to be responsible for your life or for your outcomes. When you can pray to something out here or someone out here, when you can say that, my life is not going to, God is mad at me, or the devil's in it, or whatever it is that you say, because my life isn't going the way I want it to go, rather than having to say, my life isn't going the way I want it to go, so my thinking is screwed up, and I've got to do my own practice and my own work, and I have to clear this up for myself. I mean, I often say this path is not the easier path. I mean, a lot of people think that we're like the woo-woo churchy thing, that New Thought churches are woo-woo and easy, and it's not, because it's about self-responsibility and being completely responsible for your thoughts and your actions, and there's no one there going, yeah, don't worry about what you did yesterday, you're forgiven. It's no, you know what? You can let go of what you did yesterday, but you have to go and try to make it right, and make it right within yourself, and forgive others. And I think it's more work. I mean,
it is.
Unfortunately, once you start to figure it out, you can't go back. But
once you're awake, you're not going back by your thoughts, actions, and deeds. You're creating your own reality. How much more responsible can you be in your life when you start realizing that? And that's a heavy load for too many people, I think.
I do. I think it's hard. I have cousins who are fundamentalist Christians, and who growing up, when they hit high school, college age, they were they were all seriously having trouble with drugs. And they got off of that by finding fundamentalist Christianity. And I think, well, okay, between the two, which is healthier, really, but they in their life needed the structure and the rules of fundamentalism in order to leave behind the chaos that they had. And okay, it's good for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't matter which you choose if it's getting you to a point where you're becoming more aware, self-aware, and moving in a positive direction for yourself, then that's all a good thing.
I just wish that some of the folks who are moving in a positive direction for themselves didn't think that they have to make everyone else do the same exact thing.
Exactly.
Right.
Really,
yeah.
If we could let go of that, it would all work out in the long run.
Yeah.
Well, one of the problems I see with structured religion is that they think that spirituality and religion only happens on Sunday in the church. And they don't realize how spirituality can be a practice in our daily lives. And they don't see that ordinary things can be spiritual. And so we should probably talk about that. How do we put spirituality into our everyday life, and what is it? What can we do to add it or to increase it?
I think it's everything if you want it to be. First of all, it's the basics that we teach. Have a meditation and a prayer practice. Spend some time in quiet every day and commune with the God of your understanding or spirit or whatever you want to call it. And I know that there are people who call themselves religious who do that also. But I also know, like my sister, for instance, is a not churchy person, and I'm not even sure. She doesn't generally want to go there with me, so I think she's fairly agnostic, slightly pagan. But she is the best I have ever seen at making the everyday sacred. Like, they have special coffee cups that they use for Sunday morning because it's their Sunday morning quiet time with the newspaper and coffee, and she's the one who always has flowers on the table, and and dinner ritual with their family, and and they even do a little saying before dinner that I would call an affirmative prayer, which is, we love our bread, we love our butter, most of all we love each other. I mean, I know it's adorable. My niece is so cute. But so I think that everything in life can be that way. You can do the dishes as a chore, or you can do them as an act of service to yourself or your family.
Yes. Or it could be a working meditation.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Or you can turn the radio on full blast and have that be a spiritual experience as well while you do them. I mean, it's everything is about the thought that you bring to it.
Well, even walking down the sidewalk looking at the dandelions blooming can be a spiritual experience, because you're seeing this beautiful thing that everybody thinks is a weed, and yet here's this beautiful thing,
Yes, and you can look at it and you can go, wow, spring is back, or you can look at it and go, oh, dang it, I got to get the weeds again, and really, and it's the energy we bring to anything that we do that makes it drudgery or joy, which I would say either way is a spiritual is a practice. Mm-hmm. You can have a practice of drudgery, or you can have a practice of joy. It's entirely up to you. And I can talk about it. I mean, nobody's perfect. I'm certainly not perfect at it. I did the dishes in total drudgery this morning. But
yeah.
And we do, we do. And that's why it's practice. That's why we call it spiritual practice.
Right. Well, some people say, well, I'm not religious, but then they go and sit on the beach and listen to the waves and, hike through the forest. And to me, these are all spiritual experiences. We were actually out there experiencing the whole thing, taking it in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, it's just as spiritual to go skiing if I'm doing it in joy and in loving my life and in experiencing this amazing playground that we have called planet Earth, that can be just as spiritual as coming to church on Sunday morning.
Well, one of the best experiences I ever had.
No, you should come to church on Sunday morning, though.
You're
get over there every now and again. But I was going to say,
I'm not talking to you directly. I'm just speaking in general to everyone.
I know.
Find your Center for Spiritual Living or your Unity Church and go there.
Go there, but
that
you were
can
talking
be
about.
Within you.
Well, I was going to say one of my best experiences was actually at about 12,000 feet at the top of a ski area. And it was during the week, and nobody was up there where I was skiing with a party of 3. We were the only people out there. And I'm telling you, standing up there with nothing in front of me but unbroken snow and looking out over those mountain peaks was a profound experience. It's like you're feeling like you can see forever. You know, that old thing that I could reach up and touch the face of God. That's how I felt being up there at that altitude.
Absolutely. And you acknowledged it and you were grateful for it probably and blessed it in your own way. And that is absolutely a spiritual experience.
It was. It was profound.
In the same vein, I think we can have those same spiritual experiences, even in those where others would see it as, oh my gosh, what a terrifying experience that could be. For my own personal experience, it was when I was close to death. Very close to death. And most people would think, oh my gosh, what a terrifying experience. I had my biggest epiphany there. I really connected with Source at that point. I knew God. I knew myself. I awakened. And sometimes, it depends on your perspective and where you're at. It's to me, it's like spirituality is this infinite consciousness and all that it is. You realize the connection to everything at that point. And it can be whether, as you're both saying, doing the dishes, it can be in a situation where you think, I'm walking through a neighborhood and this is kind of a sketchy neighborhood, but look around you. These are people. We're all connected. There's the sky. It's beautiful. It's your perspective when you're in that state of consciousness.
Absolutely. And I don't know why it is. Why is it that we're so wired that it is the hard experiences that end up bringing us the most enlightenment, And then we can look back at them and we can say, well, that wasn't really that hard because it brought me all of this. But in the moment, it probably certainly was, and I keep thinking at some point in our evolution, we have to get, I don't know, for me, I always called it the God smack, like I used to have to wait until I got hit by a 2x4 to finally get it. And now I think most of the time I don't have to wait that long. I can get it, before I have to get hit in the head. Yeah.
For me, it was only once. I'm not having to go there again.
Yeah. But, and it's interesting because, I don't know. That's part of that up and down. We're not meant to be flatline people. We are meant to be people who have highs and who have lows, and they don't have to be extreme all the time. They certainly don't need to be extreme all the time. But it's. I think it keeps us awake and noticing. We keep That's what keeps us noticing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be in our own personal experience. Sometimes it can be a loved one or just something happening around us. It
Absolutely.
Can be anything that triggers it. And as you become more awake and aware, at least from my own perspective, I don't need, as you call it, Reverend Barb, the Godsmacks anymore. I can see it in slightly the littlest things now. If you become more and more awake and aware, you can catch it way, way, way before that. And then you can just live in that state of inner peace and joy and happiness and kind of live on that plateau. Yeah. You don't need to go to those highs or lows.
So this Easter thing, like, is such an example of this spiritual or religious, Easter is such an interesting conundrum. I was laughing yesterday morning with my community. I said, I actually get phone calls on Easter week. I said, most of the time I don't hear a lot about my talks. I get a little bit of good feedback, and mostly I think, silence is golden, because people tell me if they're really unhappy. But, Easter week, I get calls from people who are like, are you going to talk about the Bible part of it? Because I'm trying to understand that more. And then I get people who are like calling me saying, yeah, if you're going to get all Jesus-y, I'd rather not come. And so I was like, watch me walk today. If you don't get anything else out of my talk, you can just watch me walk this tightrope, But the reason I bring this up is that there's this whole idea, of this. So there are multiple spiritual traditions, or early ones particularly, that had figures who were gods or spiritual leaders who had the hero's journey and who then died or were crucified or were murdered or whatever, and then who came back to life. There is resurrection in multiple stories prior to Christianity and even one after. So for me, the spiritual thing is to look at, okay, if there's all these traditions that have this idea of resurrection, what is that? What is that for me? And we go through resurrection all the time, but the hard part about it is that in order to have resurrection, we have to have crucifixion. And so we have to die to some idea, or we have to die to something, or we have to let go of something, or we have to release something, or let things go in order to expand to a new way of being. And when I look at the life of the man Jesus as the story is told, and I think, okay, why didn't my question was, why didn't he just walk away? Well, maybe the deeper thing for him, who was this person who showed up as a healer, who understood very profoundly his connection to spirit, what if his next step, his next deepest thing, was to be able to experience eternal life and to know it, because he was already so far along, And so really to understand our not separation and to understand eternal life, wouldn't that be part of the experience? Is to let go of this life consciously, as he, I think he knew what he was doing. He was conscious of what was coming. Mm-hmm. And your story, Barb, your story reminds me of that. You almost died, and then you came back into this whole new way of being. You had your own resurrection.
I did. I know I did. And when you said that word, no, that's the key word. There's a huge difference. You're making that journey from your mind to your heart, where that connection to source, to God is. And at that time, I just came into my knowing, which to me is that knowing that is all.
Right. See, Judith, you missed a great talk, by the way.
Oh, is that right?
I'm just kidding.
But don't we hear this all the time about people having near-death experiences, and it's like a gigantic epiphany, and they come back from it and they change their life because during this experience they saw something, or they had this inner knowing of something that they never had before?
How could you not?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you would have to have, because if you're that close, you're at the point of whether you're making the choice there or whether you're going to stay or pass. Mm-hmm. And if you come back,
and I think it is a conscious choice. For me, I literally was aware it was a conscious choice at that point. It was I was already dead on the operating table. I was gone. But I was making that choice at that point consciously within myself, within my higher self. No, I'm going to stay. I'm coming back. And I'm going to heal.
I've read that from some other stories of that too, that someplace in that journey inward of letting go, there is you know what, I'm really not ready and I want to go back.
Well, I think sometimes we're told that. I say it's not ready. You're not finished. You have not done what you came there to do. So you have to go back.
You understand. Oh, this is the purpose. Okay, this is what I have to do now. Mm-hmm. It's not always easy when you understand what the purpose is.
I've also read that that's such a peaceful place that sometimes it's hard to come back into the chaos of this world.
Yes,
yes, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
I can only say from my perspective, and that's all I can speak from. So, but I myself on my show on America Now, I've interviewed a great number of people who have experienced this and who have written a number of books about this and researched it. And there have been people, Judy, when you were saying everybody has this great experience. Well, not everybody does. I think it's where you're at within yourself, along your own journey, along your own path, because some people have been totally terrified. They see monsters, they meet the devil. I think this is something within us. It's where you're at.
Well, I've kind of come to this.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I've kind of come to this place around death where, of course we can't prove anything about it because mostly we don't, but because mostly we don't know. But if we know that what we believe and what we think is what we're creating in our life, then to me, if this is an eternal process, then the same law has to apply all the time. And so if I believe so strongly in this life that I have been terrible and that I am going to go to hell, then probably in that time in between, as I'm leaving, I'm going to get some glimpse of that. And I also think, but I don't think we stay in that, because I just don't think that there's a stay in this terrible place.
Right.
But I do think that if I'm totally in this place where I believe in this idea of heaven and whatever that looks like, that's probably the experience I'm creating for myself. I believe personally that I get to vibrate off this planet somehow, and I'm pretty sure that that's the experience I'm going to get to have.
Yeah.
And because to me, the same law has to apply.
I agree with you on this one. I do.
Well, Barb, and Barb Adams, when you said that not everybody had a great experience, that they see the devil and all this kind of stuff, we have to define the word great, because if it changes them and if they come back with a different experience, then it was great in the terms of successful. Like it whatever they encountered is what turned them in a different direction. So,
So we're not saying,
yeah. We're not going to say that
I'm sure their next experience will probably be different, because they will make the changes, whether it's through a religion or through a spiritual practice. They will make the changes in their life that allow them to believe that their next experience will be different. Because no one would want that twice, And
I think that sometimes we have to have a two before to the head before we make those changes. And maybe a near-death experience that is unpleasant is that two before the head that says, stop it. You need to go in a different direction.
And hopefully, Judy, they'll follow your course of limitless living, where they will learn not to
exactly
that way and go that direction.
That's the whole point of my course, is for people who want to make a change in their life and haven't the faintest clue how to do that. This is a handheld, walk me through it type of thing, and it's called Taking Control: How to Overcome Limitations and Create a Limitless Life. And it's exactly what we're talking about. It's identifying the negative parts of our life and doing something to change it. Because it's not enough just to want to change something. You have to have a way to do that, and you need somebody to kind of give you a helping hand to shove you in the right direction. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to give people the message that they do have a choice, that they can turn things around.
Maybe not so much a shoving, but a gentle helping hand. Yes.
Well, yes, right. Although some people need a shoving too, because they're very resistant. They say, yes, I want to change, but, and then, we hear all the litany about all the reasons why they can't change, or why things can't be different.
You're the no excuses gal, is that?
Yeah, kind of, sort of. It's like, well, if you really wanted to do this,
You're the no excuses gal. Yeah, and here's the thing. It is, and I'm going to plug it again, because I believe that, I wouldn't do this if I didn't believe. I believe that coming together in community and with like-minded people who are supportive, who, when you walk in the room, they see you for who you are. They don't see you for your baggage. They don't see you for your trouble or your drama or any of that. They see you for who you really are. And getting filled up like that in a regular is a spiritual practice in and of itself. Getting out of bed and going to some place, I don't care where it is, where you get that experience of being able to just be at peace for an hour, surrounded by people who love you for who you are and who accept you for who you are. And if that's not your experience in your church, find a different church.
Right. But it's also the power of collective energy.
Absolutely.
You have the energy of many as opposed to the energy of one.
Yeah.
And we know through affirmative prayer. We had a situation in our church that we were talking about earlier before we were on this program about a man who literally had two serious near-death experiences and came back. He made the choice to come back, even though every bone in his body was broken. And he even said, that even he was in a coma. His wife was sitting there and said, when the church made the conscious commitment to send them healing energy and prayer, they felt it. His wife felt it. Mm-hmm.
I totally believe in that. I do that prayer every week, and I feel the energy of the entire room, and that moving around.
Exactly.
And I think that's really powerful and supportive.
Yes.
It's hard. It is a path where you're responsible for your outcomes, and if that's the case, it is a little bit harder, and it's good to get that support and that juiced upness every week.
Right. Well, when your energy is running on low, you need somebody to fill it back up, and I think that's a huge boost when you can't do it for yourself.
Well, sure. And if you are out there trying to do good work in the world and trying to be good and trying to be positive in the world, you have to fill up your own cup.
Mm-hmm. You do.
Or get it filled up. And I say filling up your own cup means getting up and going someplace where someone will help you fill it up.
Well, and one of the things I deal with in my practice are people who feel that they have to meet everybody else's needs at the expense of themselves. And what I say to them is, how can you fill someone else's cup if yours is empty? You can't. You can't care for someone else if you have nothing to give.
Yeah,
and so it's really important that we fill ourselves spiritually, emotionally, whatever way, so we can help others. Because if we are completely drained and empty, we're not being very effective in the world.
But on the flip side of that too, I have this this congregant who gave me this one, actually, Chalice. She's amazing, and those of us who are doing this work with other people and supporting other people and doing their work, and practitioners and ministers and all these people doing this kind of stuff, you get filled up with other people's pain and other people's trauma and drama. And as much as we try not to absorb it, we do. And you have to go someplace where you wring that out. We call it wringing out your sponge. You have to go someplace where you wring that out so that you can continue to absorb for and from people, in a healthy way, and not in a way that is, creates dependence and weirdness.
Well, exactly. And it's easy for us to absorb other people's negative energy too.
Sure. So you got to go wring out that sponge.
Well, you do, and water seems to seek its lowest level. And have you ever noticed when you were in a room you could be feeling wonderful, and you walk into a room where somebody is griping and the energy is really low, and pretty soon you're right down there with them.
Yeah, I know.
But if you're living your limitless life and living where you should be, probably it won't affect you as much. At least I don't walk. Because I walk into places sometimes and the energy is really low and a bunch of people are really down. And if you walk in and your energy is really high, it's amazing sometimes how you can flip it the other direction too.
Absolutely. Abraham Hicks says you can't.
Yeah.
Abraham Hicks talks about how you can't be sick enough to help sick people, and you can't be poor enough to help poor people. It is the rising tide. It is the rising energy that people will reach up to meet,
That's right, yeah. And I did, speaking of Abraham Hicks, I did Abraham for a while, and Course in Miracles, all these different things. But, we were talking about prayer and affirmative prayers. Reverend Barb, is there a difference between prayer and affirmations and intentions?
Yes, and affirmative prayer includes affirmation and intention within it. It just includes this space to really connect with the divine and with who you are as the out picture of that. It's the God is and I am. And when I'm really in that place, I don't even have to do the rest of it, but it takes us generally as human beings a little bit to get into that space. And then to speak that truth of our affirmation and of what it is that we are desiring to create in a way that knows absolutely that it is being acted on before we even speak. So that, the prayer that I grew up with was very begging and beseeching and sort of this groveling kind of place. And affirmative prayer is very, I am totally connected. And I know my connection, and therefore I know that these words are powerful and truthful and being acted upon, and that I am supported in this, and so there's commonalities in all of those things, and they're used differently. I think of affirmations as things that you do to make yourself remember who you are and feel better.
I'd agree with you on that.
They're a tool for our own, self-worth and improving our own idea of who we are.
Yeah, thank you, because I think a lot of people get confused sometimes between prayer and affirmation and intentions, and they think sometimes they're really, really different. And at the same time, as you explained, there's a lot of commonality there.
Oh,
and
sure.
I think it's that intent from within where we power it from. with any of these, whether it be prayer, affirmation, or intention. That makes all the difference. We are the one. It is I am in control of all of this.
Well, it's kind of another example of what Jesus said is ask and you will receive.
Yes.
By imprinting your intention on what do we want to call a God particle or the divine matrix or whatever else, we have put it out there. So it has to come back to us in some way.
Yes.
So be careful what you ask for.
Exactly. You might get more than you'd bargained for.
No, don't be careful. Be extravagant and crazy and absolutely filled with joy.
I agree with you on that one. It's unfortunate, though, Reverend Barb, it seems so many people are just the opposite. It's like, oh, my life, oh, this and that. And that's when they start the prayers and the intentions.
Yes.
It's when they're,
And then, but that's what gets, that's what gets people moving,
Yeah. Well, hopefully so.
Sometimes it's what gets people moving.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as they're not hurting themselves and others in the process. That's,
Yeah.
Well, so much prayer is begging God for something we don't even know is in our highest and best good. We're trying to tell God what to do. It's like, well, so God sends an answer and says, I don't like that answer. I want a different one,
Well, there's a whole nother hour probably in this, that's putting it out there to this very external place for a God that chooses or chooses not to answer prayer. And
exactly.
And that's not, it's just not the God of my understanding.
Not mine.
Nor mine.
Yeah.
Right.
I found God in my inner self. Gee, go figure that.
And I found God in my kitty.
Yeah, it's in my inner self, in this life, in the present, in the here, and in the now.
I call it the Force.
Yep.
When the Star Wars came out, I walked out of that movie theater years ago saying this was an extremely metaphysical movie because the Force that they're talking about is this power that we all have, and we can either choose to use it for good or for evil. And I think that's what Star Wars was about.
Yeah,
totally.
The Darth Vader, Yeah.
I just did a talk in Ignite Fort Collins for a 5-minute deal on why God and the Force are the same thing.
Well, they are. They are the same thing. And I always wanted Luke Skywalker's little, what do you call that wand thing, that light wand?
The lightsaber?
Lightsaber, yes, thank you. That's what I want. But every time I go to the store, they're either out of the store.
Okay, Judy, now I'm gonna picture you now with a lightsaber in your hand every time I see you.
I either want a lightsaber or Harry Potter's wand.
That's how she's going to greet her clients from now on, with lightsabers.
With a lightsaber. Or better yet, Harry Potter's wand. I can wave it over them and say, okay, you're fixed. What's the problem? Wouldn't that be good?
Belief, let's just cut that one away because that belief doesn't serve you anymore.
No, it doesn't. All right. Well, I think we're coming down to the end of our hour. So I want to thank you, Reverend Barb, for being with us today. It's been a very enlightening conversation.
Thank you. I hope you actually talked about what you wanted to talk about, but I appreciate the time. That's fun.
Yeah, I think we
thank you so much.
Went over the waterfront with that one. So anyway.
I think we'll have to have Reverend Barb back, definitely, because there's so many other directions we can go.
That would be fun. I would be very open to that. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
We could talk for hours on all sorts of different topics.
Yeah.
And anyway, if you want to know more about Barb's work, you can tune in to Radio America Now on Saturday nights, and it's Radio America, Merika, with a K instead of a C. And if you want to know about my work, you can find out about it at limitlessliving.org. And also, I would invite you to read my weekly blog, and that's at Limitless Living Today. So anyway, again, it's been great fun. Thanks to both of you, and I guess
do I get the shameless plug? www.creativecsl.org.
You do.
There you go.
And you can listen to me talk all you want.
That's right.
America Now, RadioAmericaNow.com, and you can listen to it here locally, 1060 AM, KRCN.
Okay, right. So yes, and so I'll try to see you live then, Reverend Barb.
That would be lovely. See you soon. And Barb, I hope to meet you sometime.